Any good, systematic, step-by-step path to your liberation, to your awakening, should be bringing you closer to God. And even saying that in itself is kind of a misnomer because you're already held, absorbed in God. God is that creative force that's at the root of everything. It's manifested worlds, galaxies, and yes, even you. It's the root of your being. It's the root of your consciousness. You're nothing without it. And so to even say that any good spiritual path should bring you closer to God, it's an illusion because you're already it. But the question is, do you know that you're it? And the answer is likely no, because if your cells and your energies don't vibrate with that vibration of knowing of God, if you haven't had the awareness yet to see the truth, okay, life is breathing me. I'm not taking any control over that. Life is beating my heartbeat. Okay, cool. I'm not in control of that. It's just happening for me. The world, the trees are perfectly designed for me and my lungs. They are counterparts to my lungs. My lungs feed them with CO2. The CO2 gets used by the trees, and then they feed us with oxygen. It's an incredible design. And there's not anything that God isn't the root of. Now, when we say God, we may have to loosen our ideas around what God is, because there's not an all-powerful man in the sky. Even saying that nowadays just feels even pointless to even begin to bring up as an idea, because I don't think the mass collective at all is even slightly believing that either. So that means then, if God is in all of us, and we're all sparks of that divinity, which we are, in truth, because there's clearly a power far more intelligent than us that has designed this world so that it works perfectly for us and our bodies. And our bodies are doing all of these automatic, systematic processes for us, like breathing, the things that keep us in this world, and the heart beating, the blood pumping that keeps us in this world. Then there's clearly an intelligence that's far greater than us that's created it. So we're here for a reason. We're sent. You have to drop these ideologies around being a chosen one or whatever, because there is no chosen ones in a sense. Okay, there may be in a linear time frame those that are chosen to see things more deeply, more quickly, and sooner than the rest of the collective. But then those are here to serve the collective, to help them see those things too. Should the collective want to see those things? Nobody's special. That would just be another ego trip, because essentially we're all God and there's no hierarchy in that. So what does that mean for the step-by-step path that the yogis are teaching us? Well, it means in essence that this path is for the separate sense of self, the one that is disconnected, that is divided, that is separated from the wholeness of God. Now, let me tell you why our connection to God is so important, and why it's so important to make this real for ourselves. Well, there's a teaching in the tradition called Ishvara Pranidhana. Ishvara means higher intelligence, God. Pranidhana is surrendering to. And so the translation of the teaching is surrender to God. Now you can see, can't you, that any need to surrender to God implies that there's already a separate sense of self inside that feels disconnected from the one essence of creation. So that tool can be used in a limited way in the first instance, so that we can release our separate sense of self into the oneness of life, the one energy, our pranic field, dynamic stillness. And this is what the technology of sadhana is here to help us do. These are just the practices, the inner science that the yogis created to help us dissolve that separate sense of self into the fullness of who we are. I didn't want there to be any barriers to entry as we move forward into 2026, 2027, as the world starts heating up in exciting ways. So if you want to access some sadhana, it's totally free. It's on my channel. You can use the same foundational sadhana that my teacher taught to me. It's coming from a sacred lineage, a wisdom tradition emanating from the ancient sages of the Himalayas. But there's a deeper truth, isn't there? Because yes, the path is for that separate sense of self. But when that separate sense of self begins to dissolve, what's left? Is there a path anymore? Well, before we get there, let's talk about God's importance and God's significance in this to us, the separate sense of self. When everything else in your life dematerializes and things are breaking down in the external world, we need to seek consort We need an eternal companion so that life isn't so shaky. And if you've ever connected to your stillness, one energy of life, experientially, what you'll notice, one, there's no separation there. Two, you feel full. And three, to make this state of the foundation from which we live from, gives us that eternal companion, that eternal unwavering peace that we're seeking. Because you have to remember, we are nothing without God. It's God that illuminates our systems, isn't it? We're not doing it. Breathing's happening, heart's beating. What is that power? What is that creative force that allows our existence in the first place? Well, it's that. And so as things begin to crumble in the external world, in our own personal lives, for our own well-being's sake, we have to find something in us that cannot crumble, that does not die. And it's okay to understand this intellectually and go, yeah, I know where that place is. That's cool. But it's still very limited because it's a concept in the mind. We have to live in that state for it to be real for us and for it to actually hold any weight. And this is why the technologies in the yogic tradition are so powerful, because they are a science to remove that separate sense of self so that all that's left is you abiding in God. And this is where then the path can change. Because let's say the separate sense of self now has begun to dissolve, then all that's left is presence, God, consciousness, right? Well, then it seems like the path ends there. And from one level, a part of the path has begun to end there, but a new one opens up. And that's where a life of service, of devotion can begin, because you recognize anywhere that you go in your life, because you're not in control of this, you're sent and you're needed there, and you're just following and serving the creative force that brought you there. So no need for insecurity, no need to prove, no need for your own personal ambition, because you see that realistically, that which brought you there is the real doer, the real mover of life, God. And so any achievement that feels personal is his. So we switch from this separate sense of self, spiritual journey, that's looking and discovering the I sense and understanding, okay, this is separation, this is separate to me, into a path of devotion. And that's the next stage of the path where service becomes available to us. True, deep, fulfilling service, because ultimately you're using your body, which was never yours anyway, to serve life. How do I know it was never yours? Well, you're not the one breathing. You're not the one meeting the heart. So we give our body back to life. And we serve it in the way that life asks us to serve it. At this stage in the path, because there's no one separate sense of self inside really trying to ever leave stillness. And of course, you still have an ego. So like at times you'll seemingly leave stillness, but you'll come back because you'll go, oh, this is so silly. Like I'm just the one consciousness. What's going on here? Why would I leave my eternal resting place to go and seek fulfillment or pain through the knowledge of my mind? But because there's not so much of a separate one trying to escape the internal reality, we begin to mature, we begin to deepen into that consciousness, and we become devoted as we communicate with that one inside that illuminates us, that gives us life, to our great joy, because really we are worshipping beings in our nature. And we're very grateful beings in our nature to be gifted this experience of life. It's beautiful. But only when we can remove that separate sense of self with all of its preferences, with all of its desires. It's not saying you won't have desires. You will. It's not saying you won't fulfill some of those desires. You will. And God's not a tyrant. They won't be fulfilled all of the time. We know that. And then the desire really only becomes for connection to that, for developing a personal relationship with that from our separate sense of self, because you'll never really get rid of it completely. Begin building that relationship tangibly with God so that you never, ever are alone. You never were. You never feel alone ever again, because God becomes your eternal companion. Then the weirdest switch happens. You no longer really want something for yourself anymore. Of course, you won't turn your nose up at more money, more success, blah, blah, blah. But you recognize the one that's doing that, or that will create that, or that will elevate you to that place is God. And so you end up just wanting more communion, more connection, more depth with God. And that becomes your primal desire. And on a well-being level, there's nothing that touches it. Anyway, I hope this helps. Love you lots. Bye-bye.